Malcolm X was an African American leader in the civil rights movement, a minister, and a supporter of black nationalism. He urged his fellow black Americans to protect themselves against white aggression by an any means necessary philosophy, a stance which often put him at odds with the nonviolent teachings of Martin Luther King Jr. His charisma and oratory skills helped him achieve national prominence in the Nation of Islam, which was a belief system that merged both Islam and black nationalism. After Malcolm X's assassination in 1965, his best-selling book popularized his ideas and inspired the Black Power movement. At age 6, Malcolm Little entered a foster home, and his mother suffered a nervous breakdown. Though highly intelligent and a good student, he ended up dropping out of school after the 8th grade. He began to deal drugs and earned the nickname Detroit Red due to his red streaks in his hair. At age 21, he went to prison for larceny. It was here in jail that Malcolm X first encountered the teachings of Elijah Muhammad, which was the head of the Nation of Islam, also known as the Black Muslims. And this black nationalist group identified white people as the devil. Soon after, Malcolm adopted the last name X to represent his rejection of his so-called slave name. Malcolm was released from prison after serving 6 years, and he went on to become the minister at Mosque Number 7 in Harlem, where his sermons in favor of self-defense gained the organization many new admirers, as the Nation of Islam grew from 400 members in 1952 to 40,000 members by 1960. His admirers included regular citizens and celebrities alike, such as Muhammad Ali, who became close friends with Malcolm X before the two of them ended up having a falling out. His advocacy of achieving by any means necessary put him at the opposite end of the spectrum for Martin Luther King's nonviolent approach to gaining ground in the civil rights movement. After Martin Luther King's famous I Have a Dream speech at the 1963 March on Washington, Malcolm remarked, "Who ever heard of angry revolutionists all harmonizing, 'We shall overcome,' while tripping and swaying along arm in arm with the very people they were supposed to be angrily revolting against?" He had no use for the nonviolence of Martin Luther King Jr., as he believed that this just encouraged whites to attack black with impunity. As he said, "Don't mistake black Muslims for those Negroes who believe in nonviolence." He warned one crowd that included whites, "If you put your hands on us thinking that we're going to turn the other cheek, we'll put you to death just like that." His politics also earned him the attention of the FBI, who conducted surveillance against him from his time in prison until his eventual death. J. Edgar Hoover even told the agency's New York office to, quote, "do something about Malcolm X." Disenchanted with the corruption in the Nation of Islam, which ended suspending him in December of 1963 after he claimed that John F. Kennedy's assassination was "the chickens coming home to roost," Malcolm X left the organization for good. A few months later, he traveled to the holy city of Mecca, where he underwent a spiritual transformation. As he said, "The true brotherhood I had seen had influenced me to recognize that anger can blind human vision." He ended up returning to America with a new name, El Hajj Malik El Shabazz. During the Senate debate on the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X met for the first and only time. After holding a press conference in the Capitol on the proceedings, Dr. King encountered Malcolm in the hallway and later stated, "At the end of the conference, he came and spoke to me, and I readily shook his hand." In June 1964, he founded the Organization of Afro-American Unity, which identified racism and not the white race as a whole as the enemy of justice. His more moderate philosophy became very influential, especially among members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, also known as SNCC. Malcolm's primary concern during the remainder of 1964 was to establish many ties with the black activists he saw as more militant than Dr. King. He met with a number of workers from the SNCC, including the chairman John Lewis and its Mississippi organizer Fannie Lou Hamer. Malcolm saw his newly created Organization of African American Unity, or OAAU, as a potential source of ideological guidance for the more militant veterans of the Southern Civil Rights Movement. At the same time, he looked to the Southern struggle for inspiration in his effort to revitalize the black nationalist movement. In January of 1965, he revealed in an interview that the OAAU would support fully and without compromise any action by any group that is designed to get meaningful immediate results. He urged civil rights groups to unite, telling a gathering at a symposium sponsored by the Congress of Racial Equality, "We want freedom now, but we're not going to get it saying we shall overcome. We've got to fight to overcome." In early 1965, while King was jailed in Selma, Alabama, Malcolm traveled to Selma, where he had a private meeting with Coretta Scott King, where he stated, "I didn't come to Selma to make his job difficult. I really did come thinking that I could make it easier. If the white people realize what the alternative is, perhaps they will be more willing to hear Dr. King." He was assassinated by a black Muslim at an organization of Afro-American Unity rally in the Audubon Ballroom in New York City on February 21, 1965. He had predicted that he would be more important in death than in life, and he was very correct in this, as he had begun writing his book, The Autobiography of Malcom X. He had begun work on his autobiography in the early 1960s with the help of Alex Haley, an acclaimed author. This autobiography chronicled his life and views on race, religion, and black nationalism. It was published posthumously in 1965 and eventually became a bestseller, inspiring many people throughout the years, especially black youth. Malcolm X was a significant figure in advancing civil rights in America, mainly due to his eloquence. The speech for which he is perhaps best known, God's Judgment of White America, is a good demonstration of this specific trait. Its nature is one which lends itself to intellectual honesty, especially when collecting personal responses to events. In this speech, Malcolm eloquently rallied against the violence created by whites in the US, saying that the assassination of President Kennedy came from the same essential violence as those against black people. This speech ended up bringing him national and international prominence, and afforded attention for himself and, more specifically, the civil rights movement. His profile was raised exponentially, and this allowed the promotion of his ideas. The speech, which was delivered against the wishes of Nation of Islam leader Elijah Muhammad, also served as the reason for his dismissal from the organization. Elijah Muhammad had wanted to remove Malcolm for some time due to his fame. This incident only served as an excuse, demonstrating Malcolm's increasing prominence and significance. Another way that Malcolm X was crucial for the civil rights movement, one that is very often overlooked, was his organizational skills. In a famous letter to Dr. King, Malcolm X mentions 5,000 to 7,000 Harlemites were likely to turn out to his protest and hear him speak. This ability to mobilize large numbers of people attests to his importance in the civil rights movement, but it could also be suggested that in pursuit of a common solution, Malcolm may have been willing to write selectively in order to gather support for his cause. This interpretation suggests that his impact was less great than as is remembered or suggested, as it might cast doubt on the number of people willing to actually gather under his singular banner. And in the struggle for civil rights, mass movement was a vital part of the campaign. However, Malcolm was significant because he was an effective strategist and organizer of individuals. Even though he was a crucial figure during the civil rights movement, his legacy is what made his importance as great as it is today, as mainly after his death, his biography, his teachings, and everything he ever wrote ended inspiring millions of young black Americans in the pursuit for equality and an end to racism as we know it today. His death, as he predicted, would be more important than his life, which means that he had to live his life as profoundly and as truthfully and as fully as possible in order to make his death mean something, and he effectively did just that.